wish a million times we'd done it. No, she said, because it's only going to increase.
I would love it if you did.
You know what? I would too.
Your hair's dancing, I like it. There are churches that need her. Is that a building? Oh my gosh! This is fantastic. So sweet. Oh, I'm you're Troy State's amazing. You know, how are you? It would, I'd love for him to
Yeah, this is a good one. Calling to order the State Board of Education meeting for February 12, 2016. Welcome, and we'll start this morning with our reports. And the first report is the recognition of AP scholars. Dr. Catherine Stein.
Madam Chair, if with your permission, I'm going to step down to the floor for these presentations on Report 1 and 2.
Okay.
Dr. Stein is attending on our behalf the Gifted and Talented Conference today, so I have the great pleasure of announcing the winners, very high achieving students in the state of Arkansas. Report 1 is recognition of our state AP scholars. This is an award that is granted to one male and one female student in each state and in the District of Columbia with scores of 3 or higher on the greatest number of AP exams and the highest average score, at least 3.5, on all the AP exams taken. And today, I'm pleased to announce that Mr. Sean Tong is the recipient of the AP Scholar Award. And he could not be here with us today, but his parents are here. And I would like for his parents to come. So, Mr. Tong, would like to present this certificate to you on behalf of your son.
Thank you.
Right? Thank you. And you get a picture.
Please, for the family of the young man, would you give him our congratulations? And certainly we extend our thanks and our congratulations to you for your dedication and for the hard work and encouragement I'm sure that you've given him. And we're so proud, and we thank you for coming today and sharing this honor, having us share this honor with you. Thank you very much.
Can I say something? Sure.
We want to ask, one of the members wants to know, everyone wants to know where he goes to school.
Right now, he's currently at Yale University, and that is where he is today because he have a great teacher from elementary school all the way to high school and even in college. Thank you.
So tell us where he went to elementary school and high school.
He went to Becker Elementary. So first grade he has Mrs. Byron. Second grade he has Mrs. Trailer. Third grade he has Miss Anderson and Milliken and Huey. And then in high school he went to Little Rock Central High. And one of her teacher is a very good teacher that said, if you walk a step forward, I will walk 1,000 miles.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaks volumes. And also, congratulations to the teachers that influenced his life and inspired him to do, and it's certainly a testament to the dedication of teachers also.
And our
I
second
congratulate them already.
Our second state AP scholar is Sherry Gao, and she also was a student at Little Rock Central High School, and her mother is here today, Miss Lee Tong. So, Miss Lee, would you come? Sherry is a student at Harvard.
Yes.
Yeah, so would you like to say a few words?
My name is Lee, and Sherry went to Harvard last fall, and she's very happy there. She graduated from Little Rock Central High. Thank you.
Give our congratulations to Sherry. Please give our congratulations to Sherry, and congratulations to you as her parent also. We talk about and stress the need for parental involvement. I think the gentleman earlier, the fact that you can name every teacher certainly demonstrates that your involvement in education in the process. So it takes a whole village. It takes a village. And so we thank you for that and congratulate your children for their excellence in achievement in education.
And to wrap that report, I think that's a great example of what we as an agency are trying to do on the positive communication about the profession. And the fact that a parent can come and quote the teachers, I mean, that's just fantastic. So we're really excited about that recognition. In report 2, these are other very high achieving students that we have today. And we have one of these students that actually could be here with us. But first, and I think her mom is really excited about the fact that I think this is the first time they've actually got to have her home for a while. So, but first I want to recognize Mr. Alan May. Alan could not be here with us today, but he sent a very nice note that I would like to read to you all. Dear Ms. Kaufman, I appreciate the board's offer to attend its meeting on February 12th. I regret, however, that I will not be present since I am in college out of state. Thank you for sending the invitation. And he is being recognized as the United States Presidential Scholar. This was a program that was established in 1964 by executive order of the President to honor some of our nation's most distinguished graduating high school seniors. And there is a very, very rigorous application process. Alan was a student at Episcopal Collegiate School here in Little Rock, and he is, let's see. I don't have a note. Is there someone here to accept this on his behalf? No? Okay. So we will make sure that Alan gets this certificate. The second recipient of the United States Presidential Scholar for
Commissioner,
Arkansas.
before you go forward, could we make it just a part of our record to add our congratulations or extend our congratulations to Alan May and his family for his accomplishments also, and to congratulate him on what he's done so far, and to express our confidence that he's going to be successful into the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. With us today is Erin McShane. Erin was a student at Conway High School West, and she is in the Naval Academy, and she was able to get special permission to be away from Annapolis today to come and be with us. And I would like for Erin and for her mother, Miss Amelia McShane, to please come and and receive this recognition. Sure.
Good morning. As Commissioner Key said, I'm Erin McShane, and I'm here today with my mother, Amelia McShane. Unfortunately, my dad, Dennis McShane, could not be here. But I wanted to just thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It is an honor to have represented the state of Arkansas as the Presidential Scholar in 2015. My experience with Arkansas State Schools is a little bit unique. I moved to Arkansas the summer before my senior year of high school, so I was a bit anxious about finishing out my high school career in a new state. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to take the classes that I needed to be prepared for college the following year. Now that I've completed my first semester and some change at the United States Naval Academy, I can say with certainty that my fears were ill-founded. At Conway High School, I was challenged by teachers who saw the potential in their students and built upon it, and they're responsible for giving me the tools that I needed to succeed at the academy this past semester. So thank you not only for allowing me to represent your state, but for all of the work that you do to ensure that Arkansas students graduate ready for the next step of their lives. Thank you.
We extend congratulations to you and your family. We thank you for those inspiring words that you've given us, because it validates what we are working toward, and that is to ensure that every student that enters any school in the state of Arkansas can work to achieve the things that you've achieved academically. We know that you're going to be successful, and we're very proud that you represent Arkansas, irrespective of where you came from.
When you hear 30 years from now Admiral McShane being announced
Absolutely.
as the chair of the
I won't
Joint
be
Chiefs of
surprised.
Staff, you will remember the day that you saw her here before the State
Absolutely.
Board. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. This certainly is a good way to start today with Report 1 and 2. Report 3 is from the Forward Arkansas Report, and I think probably there's no better, we didn't situate the agenda like this, but there's no better segue into the Arkansas Forward Report than what we've heard from the three individuals and their families about their educational attainment. So we're going to ask those.
Madam Chair, just so we might let our guests know that if they want to excuse themselves, they certainly may do that at this time before the next presentation.
Mr. Anderson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And we'd like to thank the board, as always, for giving us an opportunity to come before you and talk just a little bit about the work that, of course, that we're doing jointly as it relates to Forward Arkansas. Today's report really is just that. It's an update. We're in the early parts of the implementation phase. So we have our heads down, and we're working hard to begin to make real the progress towards the vision that we've all already agreed to. And she's not a midshipman yet, but the young lady said it right in the last part of her comment, right? That our vision is that every child that goes to school here in Arkansas graduates from high school prepared for college and career, and also prepared to be a positive contributor to their community. So it was great to have some examples of that, even before we start to talk about maybe some of the mundane parts of the implementation work. So we won't be before you long this morning. I don't have a sense. Okay. So we really just want to do a couple things. We want to give you a report on the work of the implementation work subgroups. So as you all know, we've got an implementation working group that's the committee that's managing this work, and we've broken them down into subgroups and pieces of the work that we think are really important. We want to give you an update on what we had identified previously as quick wins. We want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in partnership with ADE staff around academic distress, and we want to give you an update on the hiring status of the Forward Executive Director. One day, the staffs of the foundations that are involved in this and other folks like Jared Henderson that have been volunteering, one day we'll have to go back to our regular full-time jobs, and Forward is going to need somebody, probably some set of somebody to actually manage this work going forward. So the implementation work subgroups. We know that if Forward is going to get where it needs to go, over the next generation, there are certainly sort of 4 big pieces of work that need to have people paying particular attention to them. One is the business community. So we've got a subgroup of the implementation working group that's thinking specifically about how we engage the business community in this work. And we're thinking about the business community at several different levels, right? I think every high capacity achieving school district that we've got in the state has probably got a business community in their community that's fully engaged in what's happening in that school district and with those young people. So as a part of Forward, we want to make sure, one, that we're picking up those models, making it relevant to folks around the state, and then giving people around the state ways that they can engage in their local community. So that's at one level. But at the macro level, we also know that as a state, our business community is the one entity that benefits from graduates that are prepared. It's also the one entity that will tell us when we ask them periodically that they're struggling to get graduates that are prepared. So we know as we move into the work of Forward, we need the business community involved at both of those levels. So at the local level, engaging, investing in local schools, connecting with young people, connecting with teachers and school boards, but also at this macro level, helping us to really shape what it looks like to be prepared for college and career, so that as we graduate folks out of our high schools and out of our colleges, we actually graduating them into the jobs and the skills and the positions that the business community needs. So we've talked about, and these are all nascent ideas, we've talked about spending some time with just business leaders. And again, folks know that when you call business folks together, you got to be really clear about what you're calling them together for. You really ought to know on the front end what you're wanting them to do. And you have to make it really easy for them to engage. So we're working out what that really looks like in terms of a workforce summit or a business summit. But we think that's one of the things that we know we have to do this year in the first year of early implementation. We're also partnering with AEDC, talking to the governor's office, higher education, and the state chamber to identify, again, those businesses that we ought to be targeting. Again, this is on the macro level. So the folks that need employees, connecting with them, but also projecting out. One of the things that we talk about is if you've got a kid that's in 3rd grade and you're training or preparing that young person for the job that exists today, then you're probably doing that 3rd grader a disservice because 15 years out, when they graduate from college or when they get out of high school, the job that exists today is not going to be what they need to be prepared for. So again, working with our policymakers and our agency to make sure as we implement Forward, we're implementing it with an eye towards the present, so doing what we need to do now, but also with another eye towards the future. We also know, and we've all acknowledged this, that certainly if we're going to make consistent progress, then we need to keep our eye on the policy ball. We need our legislators and policymakers making decisions that really support things that are research-based and support the things that we know work in terms of educating children. So as a part of Forward, we know that policymakers are another population that we want to spend quality time with and continue to talk to. So we're working to identify some preliminary priorities for the 2017 session, and what we're doing is we're putting together an engagement plan. And here's how I shorthand that. We did a lot of work, and I mean we collectively did a lot of work coming up with what's in Forward. We've talked several times already at different venues, the Joint Legislative Caucus on Education. We also spoke at the adequacy testimony about a month or so ago. And in both of those venues, what we've suggested to legislators is that as you think about education policy, whether it's for the special session or the fiscal session or for the 2017 session, as you think about those things, think about Forward. Because what we've done with Forward is give you a wide array, a pretty long menu of things that are both research-based, things that we know we ought to do based on research, and things that have also been tested through the lens and the filter of public will. Remember, what we came up with Forward was the result of 8,000 people being surveyed and going out into 50 communities and talking to 600 plus people in person. So what's encompassed in Forward is really a policy agenda without policy around it, but it's really a policy agenda that we believe represents the best thinking, not only of people that know everything there is to know about education, but it also represents some subset of the will of the people of Arkansas in terms of willingness to do things. So we're going to be continuing to introduce them to Forward, continue to expose them to Forward, continue to answer their questions about it, and we're going to want to do that consistently. We also know we need to continue to communicate about Forward. At some point, we want Forward to become a household word. We want parents to be talking to their children about Forward. We want, again, policymakers and other stakeholders to be using Forward as the way that they think about education writ large in this state. And the only way that we do that is we talk about it. And that happens, again, at several different levels. There's this big macro level communications work that we'll do, and that's involved in, we're here today, the news is here today, it'll get out on the news, right? People begin to see it. But maybe more importantly is the work of going out into communities and actually, again, duplicating what we did when we came up with the ideas in Forward, is going out into communities, talking to people about what their aspirations are for their communities, and then helping them mesh those things with Forward as a framework potentially for moving their communities into the future. So we want folks in DeQueen and Mena and Springdale and Lake Village and Eudora and Crosset and Jonesboro and Blytheville and Luxora and Batesville and Southside, and I think I hit all the regions, didn't I? Arkadelphia, I think I got all of them. Mountain Home, there you go. I think I got all of them. But we want people in those communities, again, talking about and using Forward in their own conversation. That's whether or not they've got an official connection with us or not. We think it's something that if you want to go talk to your school board, you can take Forward with you. If you want to go talk to your teacher, you can take Forward with you. So we're going to be doing a lot of talking and communicating, and again, that's stuff that we'll do in partnership with the state board. And then the fourth thing, and this again gets down to sort of that nitty-gritty area, is Forward communities. Staff were in Southside yesterday, Southside School District in Southside, Arkansas, which I didn't know was a place, Southside, until I got there, and they said we are the newest city in Arkansas. But I tell you what, we talked to some young people there, and I don't remember the proper names of the young people, but as we talked to them, a young person would stand up and introduce themselves and say, my name is Bill, and I am a junior here at Southside High School, and I'm also a freshman at the community college. And my desire is to go into technical engineering, and here's what I'm doing now as a high school student, and here's what I'm doing as a college student at the same time, and here's the job I'm going to go get, and here's it's going to take me 6 months to get this certificate, and then once I get the certificate, I'll make this much money, and then once I do that, I'll spend another 6 months on this, and I'll have my associate's degree in a year, and I'm going to be able to make this much money. These are kids that were talking Forward language, right? So there are communities and school districts out there already that, one, are doing the work of Forward, where they're making these connections, where kids are graduating. And then there are other communities that have the aspiration. So the Forward communities work is really about identifying those communities and figuring out how, as Forward, we can provide support to do what we say two things. We want to amplify that work. So we want to lift up places like Southside and other places that are already doing some of this stuff so that other districts and communities can see that it can be done. We also want to accelerate the work. We want to use the resources of Forward to give communities the technical assistance that they need, that if they say we want to do something like Southside or we want to do something like this other community, the resources that they need to accelerate that progress. Forward is a generational commitment. But we also know that we can't wait a generation for kids that need what we're talking about now. So the quick wins part of the work, let's see. There were 4 quick wins that we talked about, increasing flexibility and efficacy in professional development. And again, this is the place, where the work sort of slows down a bit. So this is where we've got our head down. We're digging in, trying to learn as much as we can, and then figuring out how we can be of assistance. But the headline there, and this is stuff that you all know, is that the ADE, the legislature, they've already done a pretty good job of increasing flexibility, increasing the ability of districts to do different things with professional development. The question is, how much do districts know they can do? How much are folks willing to do? And can we get those models out there for folks to begin to do more there? So the work there that we're doing is we have done a few focus groups. We'll be doing some more focus groups with district administrators, with school leaders and teachers. We'll be talking to the co-ops, and all that's in the name of identifying sort of what's holding us up from moving quicker with the flexibility that we have. The next quick win, and we've talked about these before, are streamlining ADE regulations. Again, the headline there is that this is stuff that ADE was already working on and has already made some progress on. We're actually working on, in partnership with ADE staff, sort of a complete analysis of all the places where ADE has flexibility to shorten feedback loops, to use one form instead of two, to get one piece of information and use it multiple times. And again, this is work they're already doing. What we believe that we can do is just add them, give them a little bit of extra capacity to move a little bit quicker in those work. So again, these are things that we're working in partnership with ADE staff on. The next quick win is improved training and ongoing training and professional development for school boards. Again, as the local governance body, we know that school board members need to be as efficient, as effective as they can. We're working closely with the School Boards Association. Again, a lot of this is interesting stuff, because what we're finding is that, and this is, I guess it makes sense because we worked with all of these people to put forward together, but what we're finding is there are a lot of great ideas out there. There are a lot of things that are already happening. For us, it's sort of the pace and the scale at which they're happening that we want to be able to help, again, accelerate and amplify. So we're working closely with the School Boards Association to really identify places where, again, we can help them just do what they're doing a little bit bigger, a little bit quicker, and a little bit better. And again, in terms of the nitty-gritty, what a lot of this is identifying places where this stuff is already working, lifting up those ideas, and then helping other folks say, okay, so how can we get to that level of operational excellence? So we'll be looking at 3 or 4 school boards that are high performing and sort of diagnosing how they got there and how they stay there. And then the final thing in terms of quick wins is expanding school breakfast. Again, we've been working with we've put together a partnership with the Hunger Relief Alliance, and again, this is clearly a place where it's amplify and accelerate. I would start saying numbers, but I'll get them wrong. The headline is that only a fraction of the schools that are eligible for the community eligibility criteria, where they could give free breakfast and free lunch to every kid, only a fraction of those schools are doing it. There really aren't any sort of technical barriers to doing it anymore. So what we're going to be doing is figuring out how to propagate that information out into school districts and to school boards to say, you know, this is something that's easily done. It's not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you from a research perspective. You know, kids that are fed learn better, but also from an administrative perspective, it's going to reduce some of your burdens. So again, Forward in that instance gets to be the cheerleader, the amplifier, the person that helps AD staff and other folks say, this is okay to do. Let's put together a campaign. In my mind, I've got one of those thermometers on the wall that says, you know, we're at 70 today, we got to get to 400, you know, we're at 80 today, that kind of thing. But again, making people understand that these things are real. And then something that seems as simple as this is not just doing it just because you can do it. It's actually going to help you with your student achievement. So those are our 4 quick wins. And then the final thing is the bigger piece of work is supporting schools in academic distress. Again, this is a place where we're sort of got our heads down and we're trying to learn as much as we can. We've had several good conversations with the commissioner. We talked last week with the school improvement unit. We'll talk next week with the intensive support unit. I think I've got those acronyms right. And again, part of what we're trying to do is learn what's there, just get a better picture. And then figure out how Forward, again, with some of the heft of the foundations behind it, can help accelerate work that we know already is being done and we know already wants to be done in a more efficient way. So ideally, as we come back next time, we'll have a little bit further update for you on what we'll be doing across all of these things, but certainly on the work with schools in academic distress. And with that, I think I will invite, if I could, Madam Chair, I don't know if I can invite people to do stuff or not.
Participating.
But Dr. Barth and Commissioner Reith have both worked with us. Dr. Barth is the liaison, and we were working with Commissioner Reith on some work, but I'd invite them, if they wanted to elaborate on some of the other things that we're doing relative to their work.
We'll start with Dr. Barr.
Yeah, and thanks, Corey. The thing that I have noticed in the implementation working group is how thoroughly engaged really busy folks are in this endeavor. I mean, if you look at the list of folks who are on the implementation working group, they're folks with lots of responsibilities, and they are clearly setting aside time for this. I mean, these are very well-attended meetings, very engaged meetings, high-energy meetings that break into subgroups along the lines that Mr. Anderson laid out, and so there's a lot of energy there. I think what we have to do to maintain the momentum statewide is figure out a way that this vision is continually expressed at the individual community level, but then also at the statewide level. And I think we all know that we're at this point where we want to get on a trajectory where we're going to make a big jump forward in this generation. And there have been two other moments since I've been around where in this state we've done that with, and those were both in response to court decisions. Here we're doing this not because the court has told the state we have to, but because we recognize that's important to do. But I do think it's harder to maintain that kind of energy and engagement when we don't have a looming court decision. And so I think that we've got to figure out this way on the communications front that it does become a brand that everyone at every level, from policymakers down to community leaders down to rank and file citizens, kind of understand. And that's, I think, the key challenge over the next coming months and year. The other thing that I think that Mr. Anderson and I talked about a little bit the other day is I think it's very important, this board as a partner in this endeavor, that we figure out what our role in this is pretty soon. And I do think the best opportunity is in that streamline AD regulations. And Ms. Clay put together just a great spreadsheet of kind of the numerous recommendations that we have signed on with in the forward priorities, and then how that maps to regulations. And there are a number of those things where the state board does have a good deal of room to maneuver. And so I think in the next 4 to 6 months, I think we've got to figure out, okay, what's our place in this? How can we really help this process along, rather than just being observers who hear a report every 2 months? But I really want to find our way that we are pushing this progress along. So those are my thoughts right now.
Good points, good points. Ms. Wright?
And actually, that perfectly set up my comments, which is that in that same goal and vision and strain, obviously working with Forward and then with some of our other members at getting some maybe outside technical assistance through NASB, the National Association of State Boards of Education, or now even from folks, because workforce development is so integral to this, because you also have a simultaneous project, which is Expect More, because all of this is kind of coming together, and it's not about isolation, but does really require a time right now of alignment and such. Our work, and that's why we wouldn't have proceeded with a NASB application or conversation without Forward, right? Because all of this has to intersect and such. And so that's been my main work of the last few months is just trying to connect the dots to maybe get some additional assistance, because in addition to the changes we're experiencing here at the state, where NASB is making the stipend available, is because as we we've heard yesterday from the reports, right, federally, we're seeing lots of changes, so there's transitions here. And then as I'm coming to learn more and more, a novice in this area, but as the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation folks had already clear on their forefront, is that there's also sweeping changes happening in the field of career education and workforce development, both federally and at the state level. And so there's just not a better moment than this time and right now, right, with these transitions going on, to do it right, to maybe ask for some assistance, not just here in the state, but outside nationally, and then to look at alignment so that we're not doing this conversation in silos, but that we really are, and I think, Dr. Anderson has already, emphasized, right, the communication they're having with higher education, with career ed and all of this. And so our hope is that all of us together, keeping our eye on the ball of all these moving pieces, really can achieve a potential that's not just K through 12 specific, that really does have a chance to look at the whole person and whole child. And so with that, I will just make one comment to your presentation, so that I don't have to ask our chairwoman for the mic again. And that's it's not just for you and the Forward folks, but also for the press who wasn't here at the end of the day yesterday when we were talking about the very important issue of discipline in the schools, right? And the third year now that we're finding findings between the correlation between race and ethnicity in our schools and discipline. And so the conversations at the end of the day yesterday really got to not just our children, but the whole child and the whole school, and sometimes the whole communities that need us to look. So I was excited to see the breakfast component there. I know that that's one step of it, but I urge you, these lists, and it was something we spoke within internally within the department yesterday. What can we do about this so that we're not just taking and getting these statistics right, but then actually doing something about it? I'd love to see one of these Forward communities be one of these 100 schools that do have these high rates of discipline of our African American students. I think it's going to correlate well with schools that are, needing support in achieving and struggling maybe with academic distress. I really think we need to be, and I know you all are doing it from the business angle. You all already are having conversations around wraparound services, but I know you all's involvement in general movements around the cradle to prison pipeline, but yesterday's information 3 years in a row now, and it's not getting any better, right? We have to have that piece of the conversation. So I throw that out there and hope that as part of your communities, and maybe so that we can extrapolate some lessons learned that can be disseminated, that maybe one of, again, these schools with high levels of discipline, that really could be one of the communities included, or a few of the communities included in this initial process.
Thank you.
Ms. Hook?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Two things. As you work toward and have suggestions regarding the legislative priorities, be sure and include that with us so that all three of the partners have in agreement, because we do want to be a partner, and we do want to help as much as we can. And also, I think as long as pre-K is under DHS, so we have very little input as far as the quality of it, because I've been doing a lot of research, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm about to say, but none of the top 10 international countries require children to go to school at 4 years old. Most of them don't require it at 5 years old. They found that it was over-identification in ADHD and dyslexia and on like this. So I'm not saying I'm against children 4 years old having opportunities, obviously. But since it's under DHS and we don't have any control over the quality, then I want us to see if we can figure out something, either get the legislature to move it under us, or I don't know, but just be cognizant of that, which you probably are, but that is bothersome to me.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? If not,
I just want to make one more, and in our conversation the other day, one thing I think that's very interesting and important in terms of the Forward communities is kind of the definition of community that Forward is working with. And could you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's important for the board to hear. Because you talked about a school district, and I think that's what we usually think about, but it's a more expansive view, and I think that's really important.
Absolutely, and it dovetails nicely with what Ms. Wright actually said also. So as we think about shaping the Forward Communities Initiative, we're being very deliberate, not necessarily to hang it on school districts, right? So we're developing sort of an application process right now, but what we're suggesting is that, certainly anybody that applies to be a Forward community includes as many stakeholders as you can, right? And we're also suggesting, though, that it doesn't have to be a school district that leads the application, that it can be a community organization, that it could be a business organization, that it could be a nonprofit organization, and or it can be a school district, but that all of those people should play a part in the plan. And again, that's not, necessarily genius or rocket science on our part. It's just recognizing that, again, if you look at school districts that are performing, or even school districts that are just improving, that these are places by and large where it's not just the district that's doing the work, that there are people, that are helping the district, that are people that are holding the district accountable, there are people that are bringing other resources, time and talent and treasures to the table, there are people that are involving parents in different ways. So again, as we think about what Forward Communities, that initiative looks like, it doesn't necessarily have to be district-centric. It has to obviously include the district because it's about academic achievement, but we're being really flexible, and we're going to open it up to who leads the work and who's at the center of the work. And again, I think that gets to this idea that it does take everybody to do this work.
Thank you for your report, and thank you for the, I don't want to say slow, but deliberate process that it allows the idea to go forward without going forward so quickly that you leave out some important ingredients to this whole effort being successful. So I think it's very, I feel comfortable. I'm glad that this department is involved in it, because I think it's critical to have partners. So we're proud to be a partner. I speak for the State Board and the department and say that we're proud to be partners of the Forward Initiative, because a rising tide lifts all ships. So we've got to understand that it's going to take a lot of folks to get this done. And I'm impressed more about the inclusiveness statewide, of a district that we hadn't heard of, a district that we didn't know was a town, to some very large districts. So thank you, and thank the Forward staff and the great thinkers in this initiative for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need a break, or, ready, good to go. Report 4 is closing the Achievement Gap Commission report. Dr. Restrepo, am I saying that correct? Yes, that's right. Good, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Luis Fernando Restrepo. I'm a professor at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and I serve as the interim chair of the Arkansas Commission on Closing the Academic Achievement Gap.
Would you do something for us? Would you give us some background? We have 3 new members that are not familiar necessarily with your commission and what you were charged to do and the work that you are proceeding on. So if you give us a little bit of background about how you started and what the intent of the commission is.
Yes, Ms. Newton, and thank you to you and to the members of the board and to Commissioner Key for this opportunity to speak. And that's what I have for today. Instead of the annual report, I'm going to stray a little bit from the script and put the commission on perspective, and maybe just put a discussion there to what would be the next steps that this commission can take, and especially because we're going into some sort of transition in the membership of the commission itself. So I would like to first recognize a couple of members of the commission that are here. Senator Jack Harambe, here, and Colonel Nat Todd. Okay, the other members could not be here. Also in this report, the commission would like to recognize 2 members that finished the period and served for 10 years. Dawn Tirado Simpson, who served as chair, and she serves since 2003. And Dr. Jesse Hargrove, who also served since the beginning of this commission in 2003. Okay, to start, if we could go to the first, oh, that's for me to change? Sorry, a little bit nervous. Where is the, okay, so briefly, this is what I'm going to talk about today, thank you. The background, briefly, I should be about 20 to 30 minute presentation at the most. The mandate of the commission, the work we've done, a discussion on the results, and what will be the next steps, and some questions and answers. Okay, going the wrong way. This commission was set up in 2003 after the 2002 Lakeview case, and it was reconstituted in 2009 in terms of the membership and refining some of the goals of this commission. There are 11 members, 5 appointed by the governor, 3 by the Senate, 3 speakers of the House. The composition, and I'm just briefing here what is very detailed in the legislation for the composition of this, that it really represents, although they're members, they're supposed to represent the different stakeholders. You have someone from business, and it makes a lot of sense and pretty much related to the presentation of the previous report on Forward Arkansas. Also, someone that is in the teacher training, and that's Dr. Vera Brown. Also wants the representation by members of the different ethnic minorities, such as African American, Hispanic, low-income parents, school administrator, and teacher, and so forth. So it's that's sort of the intention. And with that said, it's not a commission that is really composed by researchers in educational policy. It's more people that are involved in the field, and I will be one of them. My field is Latin American literature, but I also work with the Office of Diversity, so it's my engagement specifically working with Latino students, working with diverse communities in Arkansas, that I can make some contribution, but by no way we are all experts on this. Or at least we just know from different perspectives. The mandate was to focus on low-income and major ethnic racial groups. This is one. The second one is what I think is a very tall order, to develop a gap closing plan for the state. And these are my wording. The wording is exact in the legislation. But I will talk a little bit about that tall mandate of trying for this commission to develop a statewide plan, which know that is very complex, how to do that. And for example, when we see teams such as Forward Arkansas doing all the consultation with the community, or some members of the board here, like Dr. Barth has done some work on all this, and Mireya Reith has been doing some work. I've been able to collaborate with her on some initiatives. It really takes a lot of consultation with the different and diverse communities of Arkansas. So that one we'll talk a little bit about. Then the other role or mandate of this commission is to monitor the department's compliance with federal gap closing initiatives, such as No Child Left Behind, or whichever other ones are applied to this. Monitor the identification of other disadvantaged groups as they grow up. And as we see some of the reports, since this has started this commission, some new groups are starting. You know, when we think of the multilingual communities that we serve here, more than 70, 80 languages, groups such as the Marshallese and the Latino becoming more important, we have to see that this is a moving, a changing community in a very positive way. Then to receive national school lunch data and biannual reports from the department. That's basically also to determine income level and resources of the students. And then interact with local GAP committees. Some of the work we've done, and I've been in this commission since probably 4 years ago. We've had 2-hour meetings, 7 to 8 is by mandate. We're supposed to meet only 4, but we meet 2 hours monthly. And we listen to different reports that we are just trying to understand better what is going on there. For example, on teacher equity, we just heard, for example, a wonderful presentation from Andre Guerrero on language minority children in Arkansas, and any other reports trying to be informed to make some recommendations to the legislators. Then we filed an annual report in November, which we weren't presenting, as I understand, every year to the state board, or at least not formally, and to the Joint Commission on Education. Because some of the recommendations from the commission that we were really trying to make more impact, we decided and to reach out to the local GAP committees and to the different districts. We decided to hold some symposia in each one of the districts, and we have been able to do that for the last 4 years. We started with Blytheville, and those are professional development hours during the summer, a one-day workshop. Pine Bluff, Springdale, and Hot Springs. And we've been somehow successful attracting from 50 to 130 or so professionals and community members on those. But I would say that that's sort of straying a little bit away from the mandate of the commission, trying to reach out and putting a lot of burden because we don't have any budget for this or any staff for that matter. So in our process of rethinking forward this commission, if this is the best way to for this commission to take what it would be their best charge for this commission. Determining progress, and here I would like to recognize a very important report as I started working on this and the assignment that I had on how to document some of the progress. I went to Dr. Bart's and Nita report, 2008, Education in the Post-Lakeview Era, What is Arkansas Doing to Closing the Academic Achievement Gap? A very well thought report, very well, that really placed the role of the commission and gave us some indicators on what to look for specifically when we're trying to measure year to year what the progress is. And I will briefly mention what was recommended on that report, where the indicators was standardized test scores, graduation rates, remediation rates, access to advanced coursework, school discipline rates, which was mentioned in the previous questions and comments by Mireya Reed, and then college attendance rates. Given this indicators, we started incorporating this in the last 2 reports, the 2014 and 2015, to the point that we can find the data available into that. And I will just point that looking for the data, and I know that this is a conversation on the discipline that we found that it was, although, for example, we look at the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Office has a very comprehensive report done last year, on the 2014, on the discipline rates and the really disparities in the discipline rates nationally. When we look at the reports, what I was able to find in the ADE Data Center, you have the number of discipline incidents, violations, and actions, but you don't have that broken down by ethnicities. So someone like Professor Trevino has done some focus groups in the Little Skull district, and for example, the relationships to discipline in African American and Latino students in some of those schools that raise some concerns. Let's move forward. This graphs that I put there are only just to give us an indication. I mean, they're just an index here, sort of an illustration to a wider point. For more detail, I would say, you know, I reference the both reports, the 14 and the 15, for the different indicators. But here it's just to give an example of the persistence of the gap. And using the data that is from Barth in 2008, which actually goes back to, I think it's 1992, and he's pointing there the difference for low income and also for, I believe it's for African Americans and Latinos that are just emerging in the middle, and it's here on the left. And the next one from Gary Reeder from the Office of Educational Policy of the University of Arkansas. And Reeder just sort of collapses, you know, the data from the standardized tests from 4th and 8th grade in there. But just sort of give a synthesis of what happens in math and literacy and the gap points that he measures there. That although there's been changes and improvement, and I think that Barth report says we've done some improvement, but there are some gaps that are there. So for us to look back to 1992 and look at 2016, that those gaps are still there. That I know that, you know, if you have read Savage Inequalities of Dr. Kosel, that, you know, we felt that it was the foundation formula that was really holding our students back and reproducing these gaps in achievement. With the Lakeview case, we were able to equalize the funding formula. I think that students, you know, with the different funding that we have, there's a little bit more of equity in terms of some of the resources, but we still see the persistence there of that gap. And that's the challenge that we have in this pre-Lakeview case, post-View Lake case, and now in the 21st century.
I have a question. So is the commission charged with the responsibility of tracking this or implementing or making changes in policy that would cause it to diminish? So, you know, what is the position of the commission as it relates to the achievement gap?
Correct. And I think that is the legislation itself is a little bit contradictory in terms of it asks to develop a plan statewide and to monitor, and then to present the report. But basically, one of the discussions that we've had is that the committee has no teeth.
So the
You might
committee
say
then
it
essentially develops a
recommends
plan, and then you pass it off to who?
to
State board,
to the
state
yes.
staff,
Mhm.
Department of Ed?
Right, so it's a kind of a recommending body, basically, for policy. So it's just sort of monitors and makes recommendations. But there's what we see, there's really no, need of compliance.
Commissioner, could you tell us what happens?
Well, the statute requires that they file a report with both the committee, House and Senate Education Committees, and the governor and the state board. So really, any statutory changes that come from that would have to be driven by the legislature, or I guess the department could make those provisions, but ultimately it rests in the responsibility of the General Assembly to acknowledge and move forward with any statutory changes. What we look for is, if in the absence of statutory changes, are there policy changes, are there recommendations, are there communications that we can make with our school districts? But if it's statutory, then we're limited.
What has happened then from a statutory standpoint as far as legislators or the legislative body is concerned once they get the report?
I think as Dr. Restrepo mentioned, up until recently, they have not been having presentations. It's been a report that's been submitted, but maybe not actually discussed thoroughly or reviewed thoroughly. But I think in the last couple of sessions, or the last couple of biennia, that they have been allowed to come and actually present and have the discussion.
Ms. Rice, I think it's all, and then Ms. Savers and Ms. Zook.
No, I just wonder again if, though, there's an opportunity with this information, just like what we received yesterday around the disciplinary report, right? And then to go to Dr. Barth's comments within the forward, right, and what things may be within our purview, right, that we could address coming out of this, how we use this data, or an intentionality of not just receiving this data, but figuring out, really assessing, right, what could be done to sort of address or react to some of this, or to help put this information in the hand of the local districts or schools that maybe have the ability to do something of this. I wonder if some of this can drive, you know, the work of and again, the districts that are most directly under our charge, right, under the school improvement group or things like this. So I throw that out there as, you know, I think part of a bigger conversation. And I know we'll be getting additional reports from the various commissioners, assistants commissioners, but just maybe an opportunity, just as we are pushing districts to use data, right, and teachers, and that's been a huge emphasis. If we can also be just as intentional of not just hearing these reports or data, but if there's ways that we can help build a culture, right, of incorporating this information in a meaningful way so that it can produce results.
Ms. Savers.
Trying to think of a very, very tactful way to say this, Dr. Restrepo.
Yes.
Number one, thank you for your report. It's beautifully done. But I think my concern is this is a lot of work for you and your committee to do in all of these meetings, and there's no teeth. And if it were me and I were you, I would be probably thinking I didn't want to be on this commission. Because this is valuable information, but this is information that we get from lots of other folks. So this just seems, I know this is out of our hands, but I just felt compelled to kind of call it the way I was seeing it. So,
Can I pick? I'm sorry.
I keep thinking, since Arkansas has this pattern, individual districts have this pattern, nationally we have this pattern, that this may be based on what Ms. Dean's observations were yesterday. This may be something that the school cannot solve. Your children are only in school 1/5 of the year, if you count up the number of hours, versus when they're at home, when they're in the community, when school is out in the summer, when the weekends. So this, I think, can be helped in Arkansas because of what we're doing with Forward and getting forward communities and getting more people involved. Because obviously we've had the Lakeview case, we have a lot of people, good qualified people like yourself and your commission. We've got the Forward group, we've got a highly competent staff at ADE, people all over the state, and educators, and on and on and on. And we still are not seeing the kind of closing of the gap that we all want to see and that we need for our children. So at some point, we may just have to realize that 1/3 of a child's day and 1/5 of a child's year can't be fixed by the school. Even if we're doing everything to the top level every minute. So that's disturbing, because I want to think like the schools can fix everything. But it could be that the schools cannot, in fact, fix everything. There may be things coming to play, like we were talking about earlier, kids coming to school hungry, kids coming to school from homes where there's abuse and neglect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that affect a child's ability to learn and progress over which we have little, if any, control. We can, we can feed them. We can make sure that they're clothed, that they're safe, warm, and dry in the buildings. But there are things coming to play that influence we as adults, the kind of day we're having, the kind of attitude we have. As adults, we have become mature enough that we focus in and give our best all the time, but children don't necessarily have those skills yet, nor should they, because they're children. So I don't know. I know that we track it and educators work on it, but there may be things beyond our control, and we've got to figure out a way to engage the other parts of a child's life and a child's week in our efforts to make this happen, which obviously we all want.
But I think that is our charge. I know that the schools can't do everything, and nobody expects that to happen within the schools. But I do think that out of the preponderance of data and information and reports and whatever, it is responsibility of this body and maybe the legislator, from that end, to integrate information to the extent that we can have an impact, to make available information, to talk about interventions, some things that are there and are within our ability to make known. So we can't, I think
That's what I'm thinking about on forward.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's not that we expect teachers, but I think the larger duty of this body is to inform and talk about all partners. I think the strength of forward or any initiative is in what Mr. Anderson said earlier. It's not just a school-led thing. It's not just a community-led thing. It's just not an industry, but it's everybody. We've got to address it. We've got to correct it. We heard about expect more from the Rockefeller Initiative around jobs and developing and making the shift of 70-30. This can't be seen as a responsibility of any one individual. On the other hand, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that lawmakers have the information that they need to say, this is what the achievement gap is, these are some things that we can do and we can implement without being onerous on any one department or a segment of the community. So I don't see us as imposing necessarily another thing on schools, but to say with this information, because I don't think there are any teachers or any administrators that don't want their schools to be seen in a better light. Even the ones that are 90% effective in educating their children, everybody wants to move their kids forward. And although they may not see how they can do it, but there are, I think that's for us, and not us as a state board, but us as individuals and bodies, legislative bodies and school board bodies and Department of Ed bodies and whatever, to bring this all together in a cohesive plan. I think there are all tentacles that's out there waving wildly, but until we bring it back together, it's not going to work. And I don't want to put the responsibility on your commissioner to say, you identify the problem, then it's your problem to make it happen. I don't think it's that. But I think a larger picture is that we've got to see what piece of the puzzle, because it's all a big puzzle, and we can't see that picture or complete the picture unless your commission has, some information to share, and then in terms of sharing that information, somebody got to give you some feedback. Okay, this is good. Now this is what we do next, or this is what we do at the legislature, or this is what the department has as a part of our plan going to the legislature. The 25 things that we want to see done, a part of that is an effort around this information about the achievement gap. If we don't close it, a lot of things are negatively impacted. Prison populations, Ms. Wright talked about the pipeline from school to prison. That doesn't stop. Of young people graduating or not graduating, or graduating and don't have the ability to perform in areas that they are certified in based on the graduation. So it's all a hodgepodge until we isolate things and make sure that everything's included, but be able to look in the gumbo and see that there's a crab leg in there, for lack of a better analogy. So that's what I see.
I don't disagree with you. You just articulate it better than I did, but you're basically saying what I was trying to say.
Yes.
I wasn't trying to tell you what to say. I just said what I said.
No, you just articulated it better.
Commissioner.
I don't want anyone to walk away from this conversation thinking that somehow the department is not doing many of these things you all have been talking
And
about.
I think that you are, but I think if we don't get the explanation, it just kind of seems like here the report is, and I don't know how much of this is being implemented. I know that it is.
Well, I mean, you look at about every unit in this agency, and there are pieces of this RTI. You look at tests. You look at the work that Ivy Pfeffer's doing on growth models and interaction we have with Dr. Arola. You look at what Ms. Barnes and her group are doing with regards to school improvement, and you're going to hear some of these common themes, I believe, in a report later today. But if you look back starting at 2010, and those reports from the commission are on our website, and you can see a bit of a growth of these reports coming from the commission, but at the same time you can see some areas where there were no actionable recommendations that can actually be used in a classroom setting. And that's where we need to get. And we had a great conversation. Dr. Restrepo and I came in, and we talked specifically about bringing all these pieces together. But this is an overall theme that we're having here. You go back and you look at their 2010 report, and they talk about the Arkansas Grade Level Reading Campaign. That's been going on for a long time. It's one of the tentacles that you talked about, and it's out here, and this group is out here, and Senator Crumbly has been at this thing for a long time, and all of these efforts sometimes operating independently. And what we have to do is bring it all together to create the synergy. And when we talked, and I'm sure I'm probably getting way ahead of Dr. Restrepo, but when I was at CCSSO back last fall, Tony Evers, the superintendent of public instruction in Wisconsin, they have gone through the similar study, similar efforts, and they had a Closing the Achievement Gap report that I referred Dr. Restrepo and the group to. And they are looking at that, and Colonel Todd mentioned it to me this morning, that they're looking to see what was effective in that report as far as getting strategies that can be employed at the district level, school level, classroom level. And that's where and we need to fill the holes on the commission. We have a number of vacancies on the commission. Without those, the commission's not going to be able to operate as effectively as we hope. Trying to bring all these pieces into when they present to the legislature, and the legislature says, Commissioner Key, what do you think about this? And I can say, hey, this is something that either one, we're working on, or two, we have in our plan, or three, we're going to put in our plan. I mean, actionable steps. And I wish we could keep Dr. Restrepo on, and I'm not sure how long he has left on the commission, but those are the things that we are in communication on. If we're going to have a commission, it needs to be effective. It needs to be effectively supported by us. And it needs to go beyond just meeting to identify the problem. I think we've identified the problems over and over. And they've come to the same conclusion. So how do we now address those problems? And that's where I have great optimism that this group is digging down and identifying what those solutions can be.
Well,
Dr. Barnes.
I'm a huge fan of having anyone at the table that wants to be at the table, but I'm not a fan of duplication of activity with no outcome. So, I'm hopeful that whatever it needs to be, it will be the best it can be, and that you've got that on your radar screen, and that we can, because I just hate to see folks meeting with no positive outcomes. So that was my point. And as I said, I thought your report was excellent. But I know you too must be frustrated by the lack of the ability to really make a difference with your recommendations. So thanks again.
Thank you. I will finish the report. I would say that the commission has a very strong energy, and we're all committed educators. We have their Teachers of the Year. We have Colonel here that he says, let's do some action. Jack Crumbly knows how the Senate and all the legislation goes through. So And for me as an educator, I could not be an educator if I had no hope, although we see all the reports and the challenges. And I think it's not to single either the department or individuals specifically on where we are. But how do we really move forward? And this is sort of the conversation that we've had. So this is my thunder on this was basically, who's afraid of the GAP Commission? No one is afraid of the GAP Commission. In that sense, and that was sort of the way we can respond to it. But we cannot be, although there are many things that we cannot change per se directly as educators, as members of the committee, that these are key issues for us. For me, for example, as a parent here with children in Arkansas schools, it's very important. So although we see that the commission has no traction, that a strategic plan is needed, and that was the discussion with Commissioner Key, that we need to have achievable goals, and sort of the reference of the 2020 report by the Department of Higher Education that was just done out there. We know we have some challenges, but they set up a goal on 5 years, 10 years. So we need to do that. And we also need to set up something that is not a sideshow, so in terms it's not a duplication. It has to be integrated, and this is our appeal to you and to all the partners like Forward, Campaign the Grade Level Reading Campaign, and so forth. Because once you set it apart of this is the commission that is supposed to take care of the gap, the achievement gap, you take it out of the pipeline, and it's very easy to put it on the side, because we're all committed to all the students. So it has to be centered and integrated into all the policies, integrated into it. It will require investment, and Forward Arkansas put some numbers there, what it would require, and they have in their plan that they put in the minutes in the agenda for this. They say that their plan is to close the achievement gap by 1 generation. It's there. So here is something that we need to look of what would that investment be and how to do that. And I know there's a lot of discussions on the resources, where the resources are going in terms of transparency and efficiency. I think that is a important conversation to have. And for example, the Forward report makes kind of the different loopholes that it is. For example, if you are on 79% free and reduced lunch versus 80%, there's a big leap in the kind of funds that you get, like from 500 or so to 1,200, or that's sort of the figures I recollect. So there are here some very specific issues on the funding, on where funding can make a difference, the adjustment of more efficient use of fund. But in the last meeting where we were discussing this, why do we still want to serve on this? We don't want to serve this all our lives. We want this commission to end. We want the gap to end, the achievement gap to end. And the recommendation of Colonel Todd is that let's set up a sunset date for this commission. I think if we started in 2003, we can think 10 years forward, 20 years, it will serve its purpose. So let's, from right now, we're calling for your help to set up a strategic plan. We're going to start meeting like monthly for 2 hours. That's not conducive to develop a plan, and establish more a conversation that will invite you to some of these meetings. How can we set up a plan that is measurable of what we can do in the years that we have until 2023 or so? Then we'll think of what other strategy we need. So that is basically our proposal, our call for help. So if you have any questions, and I want to thank you very much for the conversation and the comments, and I'm really happy to be here. If I'm not in the commission, I'll still be in Arkansas. It's my home, and I'm really committed to all our students here. Thank you.
Thank you for your commitment. Any questions? Ms. Wright?
Less of a question, but more for the edifice of my colleagues. Dr. Restrepo does a wonderful professional development every year, the Latino question, that I think ties in with the achievement gap. And I was wondering if you might share with my colleagues a little information about the one that you have planned for this spring.
Okay. Oh, yeah, unfortunately, I won't be able to hold it this summer because of the different transitions that we have at the University of Arkansas until we find out specifically how our office is going to be restructuring. But we've had for 4 years a professional development workshop focused on Latino education. And we look at, mentoring, the wraparound programs. We look what works best for Latinos. And I know that something that we see, how to move the achievement gap, that one strategy doesn't work for everyone. We know that some things that we may need at the Delta may not work in Springdale. And as we see, the White House initiative for different educational excellence is looking at Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, African Americans, so you can be very specifically. So I think that whatever we do has to look at the different groups that are challenged. For example, one that I started looking into it is the Marshallese community. Although we have a growing number of more than, I think is, 3,000 Marshallese in the schools, 2,000 to 3,000, if I understand correctly. At the University of Arkansas, my institution, there are only 3 students. For me, that's shameful, and it really doesn't represent an institution, it's to the state. So I feel compelled that I have to do something. So, and those are some of the examples of the work that needs to be done.
Thank you. Dr. Barr?
First, I want to thank your dedication, and I want to thank the kind of honesty in the last slide in particular, because we rarely see commissions. Yeah. Well, and I don't think they were just calling this up because we've had so much dedication and so many hours spent on this commission, but not both, and calling out those who've not given them the support or the original legislation that didn't really give much teeth. So I think there are a variety of things there. I guess I do want to respond to something Ms. Zook said earlier. Is that yes, this is a very challenging issue, but there are other states that have closed the gap more than we have. It's been a persistent gap here, and so I think there are some lessons to be learned around the country. I think you're totally right. It doesn't just happen during the school day. We have to think about it in a more holistic way. We have to think about after school and summer programs so that we don't have summer learning loss, all of those things. So schools, that 8-hour day cannot do it, but but schools themselves as cogs for communities can be powerful change agents in this arena in particular. And so I think we got a lot of great things going on in the state, but I think we also have to continue to focus on this issue. And so that's what I'm struggling with a little bit in terms of, I don't want this I want this to work. I don't want us to lose our attention on this issue in a holistic fashion, but we all want it to work. We want it to be well-spent time. We want it to be energy that is integrated with other efforts that are going on, oftentimes by other advocacy groups and foundations that are doing great work. I think that's what needs to happen. It's in many ways a pulling together of the governmental entities, the foundations, and the advocacy groups who all have done a lot of good work on this issue, and who really need to come together because this issue matters. It's a constitutional requirement in my eyes, not just putting inputs into closing the achievement gap, but the outputs as well. And the data we saw yesterday on discipline is a very good example that we may have, although the evidence was not perfectly clear, there's some pretty strong circumstantial evidence that schools may indeed be perpetuating some important gaps. And we really got to be conscious of the times where schools are getting in the way of equity, and when their job is to promote equity.
But Jay, my sense is that this is the direction that Forward is heading, being a clearinghouse for folks like Dr. Restrepo's commission, so that you don't have to create your own strategic plan. This work has already been done, but they can use your passion about this particular subject
to keep drawing attention. I mean, Jay's right. I mean, we've got to stay laser focused on the achievement gap in a way that we haven't before because we've not made the progress that we need to make. So, like I said, everybody needs to be at the table, but we don't need to be duplicating efforts. We need to be working together, and I do think that Ford provides that opportunity.
But I do think it is important. There is value in having a governmental entity in place because Forward, obviously is a partnership with the department, but I think there is value in the state saying, this is an important.
And you're right about that. Yeah.
And I do think it's also important that individuals from the communities most affected by these gaps have a place at the table, and I think that Forward maybe has although they did a lot of data collection, at the decision-making level and the analysis level, it's important that Latino community, Marshallese community, African American community really have a place at the table. So that's.
And may I follow up then with asking that question? Have you had Dr. Restrepo direct contact with Mr. Anderson or the folks from Forward with about these findings?
Well, we haven't, as far as I recall, not having them visitors there, but we've been pointed out, following up, and with Dr. Anderson, we've worked in other initiatives like Engage Northwest Arkansas that are pretty much aligned on this. So, yes, our call is basically, we hope that strategic plan is developed jointly with the state board and with the department. Although the legislation says it's for this commission in particular to develop that plan, if you look at the Wisconsin report or even Dr. Barth's report, they required substantial research and just putting it even together. The report that we put together seems like a home movie a little bit, since we don't have all the kind of the slides and graphic artists and everything, but the data is specifically that you see on that Wisconsin report. You can see that it is time consuming, and also in terms of the research that is behind it and the delivery to make it an effective tool to go to the different constituencies, including the legislators that are considering, I don't know how many pieces of legislation in one legislative session. You have to be very brief, concise, and convincing. And that is a communication piece that sometimes we don't see, that maybe we don't have the talent in that commission. And I don't want to be here the complaining, but it's just basically we need to do this, we need to work this together. We can put together a plan that with achievable goals and complete the job of this commission.
And if I could just say then, with the conversation moving forward, I hope that part of that plan is working with the Forward Commission, because it would be great to have this lens to that. And then just to say, as a resource to you all, I know that I've shared this with Forward, and then to also equally say that if we are able to get this NASB stipend, for exactly the reason Dr. Barr said, we would get some outside assistance from national groups in identifying best practices, maybe even bringing some of those leaders that were involved in those efforts from other states here to talk with us and to share some of that. So that might be just, again, another place and resource of thinking about how we all work this together. But like Dr. Restrepo said, I have the privilege of working with him on a very regular basis. There's no stronger advocate on these issues than he, and he brings tremendous leadership, and really grateful for what he's doing on this specific commission. So I know there will be outcomes because I know him, and he won't let there not be outcomes from this. So thank you, Dr. Restrepo.
Thank you very much. I would say that Dr. Vera Lang Brown and Mr. Darren Beckwith are two of the commissioners that are the next chairs, and they compromised to do that strategic developing and invite the different partners for this. So we have that in the plan to move forward.
Thank you very much.
And also, I appreciate all the data that you have by regions of the state and teacher-pupil ratio and per-pupil expenditure, because I think that helps make it more clear to us, and we don't just have to hear anecdotal information, but we have actual facts. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next report is report 5, but before then, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
for 220 here? Yeah, really.
I saw Sharice this morning.
I checked.
I didn't know.
Not doing a good job of interviewing to begin with.
You want to, you like.
Call the meeting back to order and start with Report 5, Dr. Wild, Priority Schools Second Quarter Progress Report.
Good morning. I'm Richard Wild, School Improvement Unit Program Manager. And as indicated, the priority schools have submitted their second quarter report. I have members of the SIU here today to review the format of the reports, to highlight what we are trying to accomplish, and to give some perspective or insight in how to digest the reports. This is a major shift from what we were doing in the previous years, and as such, we just think it's good to come back and have conversation about what's in the report and, again, what the SIU is trying to accomplish. With me today, I have Dr. Robert Toney, I have Janie Hickman, I have Tia Frazier, and Misty Pittman. They are probably the senior members of the unit at this time, and all of us have been here probably some total of less than a decade together. So that means together we probably have a year or two or three at tops with the unit. We want to say that yesterday's agendas and reports were a great lead-in to what we're about to talk about today, and that we're especially pleased in listening to Little Rock School District's report and the ability of the district personnel to explain school improvement process. So that was fairly delightful for us. The other part that was delightful was listening to the questions that the board was asking. Because if we could get this depth of question about the data going on at the school site, we could move much faster. And in terms of the previous conversation on item 4, I would just like to say we could do much better than we are currently doing in terms of student outcomes if we truly understood the processes to make that happen. The last thing I would like to say is that we want to address today a little bit the discipline report and some of the things we've heard from the field, and to let you know what we're trying to accomplish there too. So that said, we're going to ask that you hold your questions until we get through the report. We practiced, but we didn't practice with questions. So we're thinking we could look like a fine-tuned relay team, or we could look like the Three Stooges. So we're hoping to get through the presentation and then take questions. So.
Good morning, I'm Tia Frazier. Thank you. Dr. Wild said that we were with the SIU, and so I thought I'd just go ahead and throw some acronyms out there since the last time I was before you, I got stumped and forgot an acronym. That happens when we get nervous, right? So SIU, School Improvement Unit. This is just a list of acronyms that we might say. We wanted to just go ahead and alleviate any misconceptions that we might have in reporting to you guys today. We also wanted to talk about the focus of the School Improvement Unit and sort of what we do. There are 5 main things that we do in accordance of throughout our day. We focus on helping districts and buildings create their vision development. We focus on finding a way to somehow quantify those visions. As we've kind of heard this morning, there's oftentimes a lot of energy around getting together and meeting whenever you're on a committee that you're excited about. But sometimes when compliance comes into play, we treat it as a checklist. And when that happens, we end up creating slogans instead of true visions and missions that can be attainable. So that's one of the things that we focus on. And the way that we do that is through developing a team structure, focusing on a district leadership team, a building leadership team, the building team supporting instructional teams or professional learning communities. Those communities are our direct support for teachers, and the teachers are direct support for the classroom. And we'll show you that in another model linear example of Stephen Barclay's in just a moment. We're expecting those teams to make database decisions, moving from general to specific analysis. We have created templates this year that we showed you back in August and September of the 45-day plans that we would be using this year, asking buildings for very specific very general information, hoping that in their comments and clarifications, they would do more in-depth data analysis and give you specific information as to how they're analyzing the results of the information we've asked for. We also research best practices. We use a tool, Industar, to guide school improvement processes. Embedded in Industar are WISE Ways, which are research-based practices. You may or may not be familiar with that wording. In the event that the research isn't in Industar, but we need additional research, it's the job of the School Improvement Unit to serve as that conduit of communication and go back and do some research for those schools, never advocating for programs, but just giving information. Oftentimes we do that at co-op sessions where we work with groups of schools, not just one district, but maybe districts from a region, and share out on charts so that they can see what one school's doing down the road, but not to duplicate a program that works in one school to another without giving that professional development in order to back it up. And then lastly, we are connecting innovations that are happening throughout ADE. Our reporting mechanisms should be a bridge for tests, could serve as evidence and leads. We are also bridging that gap with Industar, giving priority schools 18 required indicators to focus on for the year that were specifically chosen for priority schools, as well as the RTI process, because when we begin to ask about unit assessments and unit development, and then we ask about what interventions are taking place in the classroom in order to bridge those gaps, we want to know specifically about RTI. Oftentimes you'll see on those reports that they don't give us comments and clarifications as to what they're doing with the interventions. So it's our unit's job to go back into the building to work directly with them in order to figure out how to answer those questions. So our reporting is truly a way for schools to tell their story And this is just that last slide I would like to show you, which is the Stephen Barkley model. And we're going to read it in the opposite direction. So we're going to go from right to left. So focusing on student achievement, because unless we impact the student, we will not impact student achievement. So the way we do that is by changing the student's behavior. And the person that is directly related to the student is the teacher. So we must change the teacher's behavior. So in order to give support to the teacher, that happens through PLCs or instructional teaming and peer coaching, coaching models from instructional coaches, instructional facilitators throughout the districts. And those people that are leading those PLCs are getting their direct support from the leadership. And then outside of this model, this would be a building model. So outside of this, we would expect that to carry over into the district. So how would the district be supporting the building leadership team? And how are they able to report to the district in order to address certain problems that they may be having?
Hi, I'm Misty Pittman, and we'll move on to what actually is being reported. Schools, along with their district, are reporting the progress that they have made on their improvement plan in InduStar and the tasks or activities completed related to moving their current reality closer to full implementation of the key indicators. The leadership teams provide a summary of their current reality in relation to the level of development of team structure, instructional team activity, climate, and community engagement. Also, we were pleased to hear yesterday in Little Rock's report how they could correlate their pre and post assessments into their reporting of student progress related to what was just taught and what was actually learned. The principal's report provides a picture of support that the school is receiving from within the district, from external providers, from their ADE, SIS. This also provides the principal an opportunity to share barriers that the school faces in their attempt to execute plans that they've devised to solve problems. Also, within the leadership team report, you will see schools are providing surface level data. The numbers alone don't really provide us significant information. Our concentration lies in the district's and the school's ability to analyze and respond to that data. And that's the purpose of the comments and clarifications. We've really been working with our schools and guiding them to provide details on the analysis of the data that they're providing in their reports.
I'm Robert Tony. I'm one of the school improvement specialists in the school improvement unit, and I have to push the button on the right. This model depicts the levels of support, or the layers of support that would be necessary for effective school improvement. We have taken the traditional top-down approach, where decisions are typically made at some administrative level and then flows down through the organization and lands in the classroom. And we've taken that and turned it upside down. Our position there is that the most effective place and the most powerful place that school improvement is going to take place is with the classroom teacher and the instructions in the classroom. Now, this model would then, as you go down the pyramid, it would show the layers of support for those teachers. And everything should be pointing to that support for what's going on in the classroom. The very first layer of support for a teacher is those collaborative teams. We call them instructional teams. Yesterday in the Little Rock report, they talked about how effective those colleague teams, and these teams would be comprised of the teacher's closest colleagues. That would be either a grade level or maybe a subject level team or something like that, who meet collaboratively to develop the instructional units and the assessments for those units. And then flowing on down from those instructional teams, we would send information to the campus leadership team, and this is kind of the core team at the campus level. And that, the work for that school leadership team would, again, go back up to the classroom, be based on student data, student assessment, so on and so forth. And there would be a two-way communication between the PLCs, or the instructional teams, and the school leadership team, with information being generated through student data, moving to the instructional team, down to the campus team, and then whatever decisions need to make at the campus level, flowing back up the hill to make significant support for teachers. And the same concept goes from the school leadership team to the district leadership team. That same information, whatever information the school leadership team decides is necessary, that they need extra help or a deeper help at a district level, that information, again, based on student data, goes to the district leadership team, and then whatever decisions need to be made is a two-way information conduit between this campus and the district. And the base of this pyramid is the school board. And we can't overemphasize the importance of what the school boards have to do with school improvement. The kind of two basic premises there is that the school board members need to have a working knowledge of the school improvement process, and then they need to also understand their role in that process. The policy making role, the support role. They are the conduit between the school district and the community, and so that is a very important role that they need to be knowledgeable of. This slide starts out, it says that it's cornerstone, teams are the cornerstone of InduStar, and InduStar is that platform we're using for a lot of our work. You know, I would also add that this teaming process is really the cornerstone of school improvement. And if you look at these teams, and there's two or three different districts have some different models, but basically they're all the same, saying the same story, just in a different graphic representation. But kind of at the center of this piece is the campus leadership team, directly supporting the instructional teams. Again, going back to the pyramid, which is the main support and main support for the classroom teachers. And so then that leadership team has spokes coming out from it. It would have a communication conduit to the district team. There would also be some other support teams, a community team, a parent team. These teams may, typically the campus leadership team is going to meet twice a month. The instructional teams meet all the time. And by that I mean, you know, if two teachers are walking down the hall talking about what they're doing in third period, they're having an instructional team meeting, maybe informally, but they also have, you know, PLC meetings and those kind of things that are structured. The school community parent voice team, you know, this may be something that meets quarterly or something to give the parents team. There's also, you look over in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a reference there to a management team. And typically this is people that are on campus, assistant principals, custodians, teacher leaders, who work with the everyday nuts and bolts of running the school. The idea there is if we can separate some of that stuff out, then that leaves more time for the school improvement specialists, local school improvement specialists, the principals, those teacher teams to concentrate their time and spend their time on student data, student achievement information.
Good morning, I'm Jamie Hickman. Maybe? Yes. Okay, which button?
On the right-hand area.
I did.
You need some specials.
I do. I need some technical.
Point it backwards. Point
It didn't go in. Oh, no.
Just turn around and talk back.
So it's not my fault. That's a good thing. Okay. We'll go ahead with your hard copy then. Okay. There it is. Yay. Okay. Okay. This is the IndoStar platform, which is our statewide platform for ACCEP. All schools in the state are using this to create their ACCEP plans. This is the main page where they begin their work. The leadership team will first assess where they are. This gives them each indicator. They will find what their current reality is based on that indicator. Then they will create a plan of tasks to try to implement that plan to get their school into complete implementation. And the third step is the monitoring step, and this is where they look through WiseWays, which is included in InStar. That's the research piece, and see if they've completely met all the pieces that WiseWays says it needs to have to be completely implemented. And they create these plans on a quarterly basis. So when they create tasks, the tasks that are in each quarter should be tasks that they should be able to complete during that quarter. On your next page, let's see if I, yay. Okay. All the priority schools were given this sheet. These are the 18 indicators that priority schools were given. The highlighted column is what they were all asked to do during the first quarter. And once they had those implemented completely, then they could go on and choose from the other indicator boxes. If you'll notice, the very first part is establishing that team structure. So without the team structure involved, the rest of the things don't fall into place correctly. All the schools in the state were given 13 indicators to assess. Priority schools were given 18. So they have 5 extras that would lead them to school improvement, 5 extras that the regular schools in the state don't have to do. Also, the ADESIS, once the school says, okay, we created these tasks, we've done them, we think they're fully implemented, then it's our job to go back and look at all their documentation and see if we agree. And once they are, then they can move forward. You also need to know, and I think Tia referred to this, that some of these were chosen specifically because they align well to tests, so that would help the administrators in their test evaluations, and they also align with RTI. Okay, the next page. This is a full implementation description, and the schools were given one of these for each one of the indicator boxes so that they could see this is all based on WiseWays. And it shows which indicators, the IDO1, the IDO4, ID10, all of those are indicators that they're given in their box, and this is a compilation of the WiseWays description of what it should really look like. They were also given this piece. This is the piece that that lets them know what we're going to monitor. So these are the actual things that we would look for under each one of their indicators to decide whether they're fully implemented or not. And they were given all of that at the same time. Yeah.
So obviously, as we look through the reports, we're looking for common themes and potential areas for us to provide PD. And that said, call it back up. Yeah. Could we go back 1, 2? Oh, we can move it now?
You need water over there.
No?
Y'all need water? The coffer's over there.
Okay, it doesn't matter. The themes and common challenges. We're not going to read each of those, but just to know that we are looking through the reports for themes. And our biggest challenge and their biggest challenge is getting out of compliance think. That they're not taking their data and analyzing it. So they're collecting lots of pieces of information and they're filling out reports and putting them into AppScan, but they're not disaggregating their data. They're not looking at who are the students. And they're not then saying, do we have commonalities amongst these students, and therefore there's some things that we could do. Just like last year, you saw a lot of TLI results, and they reported quarterly benchmark information to the board, and they would have a score, a percent of students that were proficient. The big question was, what did they do after they received that data? Okay? And for the most part, they behaved in the same manner after they got the data as they did before they got the data. Okay? That is part of compliance mentality. And so they're doing the act of collecting the data, but then, for the most part, they're not doing the research of what to do now that I have the data. And so what we do is we do good work. Everybody is busy, everybody's working hard, but that for the most part, we're not doing thoughtful work. And it's that absence of thoughtful work that's really hurting the schools where the kids need the adults to be the most thoughtful. Okay? The same is occurring at the district level. That for the most part, our biggest challenge with the district is that they're doing minimal analysis of the building level data to identify or drive the decisions for how they're going to support the school. And so there has not been this system in place. And that is one of the things, again, referring back to Little Rock yesterday, you can tell that we have a systems thinker at the helm. Okay? And that by having a systems thinker at the helm, it is empowering the other administrators to be more engaged in the work. And you could hear that as they were explaining who was doing what and what was happening. In truth, one of our biggest challenges with the district, and there's a couple of hypotheses about why this is, but that the building is not viewed as a priority. Okay, we call them priority schools, but it is more of a negative term than it is this school should get the priority attention. Okay, it's more like a label so that we can smack their hand. We've got to get out of that think. The other problem, for the most part, is that, and this is a hypothesis, that the district may not know how to help. Okay, and certainly they are locked in with their thinking, so if they don't approach it in a systemic think, they won't know how to help, so they will throw programs at the school. And the answer is not more programs, different programs year after year after year, and that's where we see a lot of districts amassing lots of materials and lots of things, and none of the students' scores improving, none of the learning improving. Okay. Enough on that. Okay, when we think of school improvement, we tend to hope that it's an upward trend line. We tend to hope that it's an upward trend line headed towards a vision. We want our schools to evaluate themselves in terms of a current reality. Where are we right now in comparison to where we want to be? In truth, with a well-written vision, you can break it into components and you can quantify it. And then you can identify indicators so that if we were to be moving towards that vision, what would be the indicators along the path? And so we have a saying that if you take your vision and you subtract your current reality, you've got your improvement needs. Okay? And so it may take 3 to 5 years to get to that vision. And so we would think that there would be goals along the way. That each year there would be an annual goal. As you think of how we've reported to you in the past, we have given you AMO data. That was the test score data. Well, you can do that with every indicator that you have. As we look at a year, we use the term IMO, okay? Interim measurable objective, meaning we would like you to break the year, your progress towards the annual goal, into components so that you can track it as you go through the year. And so, as we look at that, we're looking for about 3 to 4 points in time where the school is actually evaluating, are they on track towards the goal? Okay. Now, for the most part, you can anticipate that this is what we've been teaching for the last 3 years. Okay. The question that we're asking ourselves internally is, how come nobody hears? Okay. And so we're looking at different methods and different approaches to get the schools to do that. One of those approaches simply is the format by which we ask them to tell their story to the state board. And now we're coaching them in how to do the reports, okay? Because your report should really just be a record of what you've been doing for the entire quarter. Okay? That said, let's move directly into the report.
He likes it so much he's going to take it with him. Okay, so a lot of work was done this past year, or over the past, it really happened during the summer. It's really, with the anticipation of the waiver coming about, we were uncertain of what it may look like when schools would report to us. But what we knew is that we had madness prior to that. We had IMO reports. The schools were basically writing their own IMOs. They were all over the place. They were very subjective, although the schools maybe didn't recognize that what they were writing was very subjective. It was, and in truth, it was very surface level. Just by increasing their classroom walkthroughs by 20% each quarter, what was that? What was the point of that? What were they looking to gain? What were they hoping to gain by doing so? For schools that were academically distressed, they had academic distress recommendations. So they had a 45-day plan that they were working on. And then they had InduStar and indicators that they possibly started working on 4 years ago that were no longer part of what they needed to be working on. And all of the administration and the leadership team in the building had changed. So they didn't feel like it was important to them, because most of the indicators that they started, basically they needed to go back and start over. So over the summer, that was kind of how the 18 indicators that were very specific to priority schools, that's how that came about. As we went out into schools in July and August, those schools that were academic distressed, we made sure that as the school improvement unit, we sat down and we looked at those recommendations, and we aligned those recommendations for the schools, with the schools, in order to make sure that they were aligned to the InduStar indicators that they were required to assess. That way they weren't working in isolation, 3 different reports. Instead, it was all streamlined into one report. As Ms. Hickman showed you the chart a moment ago that looked kind of like a rubric, but that was the IMO, all of the IMO areas with the 18 indicators on it. What we didn't point out was that it does address the 4 IMO areas that are required according to the waiver. So a change in teacher leader practice, a change in student achievement, a change in safety and discipline, and a change in parent and community engagement. So those things are all addressed within your report. And as you're looking at the report, you basically have 4 sections. You have the cover page, the IMO areas, the principals report, and the leadership team report. So this is just the cover page, and on this page, you'll notice 3 bars down where it says status. if the school is a priority school and they are academic distress. You will see that there. So you will know prior to turning the page whether this school is going to have academic distress recommendations that are aligned to the indicators that they're required to report on. So as I go to that next page, at the top it starts out with the IMO Area 1, and it tells you all what that means, or reminds you of that, a change in teacher and leader practice. And if there were an ADE recommendation aligned to this area for an academic distress school, it would be in that next box. And then the sheet that Ms. Hickman showed you a moment ago that was given to all of the priority schools that describes the fully what it looks like when fully implemented. Okay, so we've got that IDEO 1, IDEO 4, and IDEO 7 grouped together as indicators in the category for establishing a team structure with specific duties and time for instructional planning. When that's fully implemented, we use Wise Ways in order to determine what that looks like when those 3 indicators are grouped together. And we put that on the template for the school. So they're not actually having to come up with what that looks like. So basically the vision, if you will, for those 3 indicators when grouped together is written for them using research-based practices and researches that are within Wise Ways. The part that they have to do on their own is figure out where they are currently. And so that's where that next box comes into play, where it says current reality of effective practice. And what we would hope is that as they report to you all each quarter, that current reality changes and slowly becomes closer to the vision. So given that, we would go to the next page where it says quarterly objective. So this is where the IMO, the interim measurable objective, would come into play for what we're going to do this quarter towards reaching our goals. And then we task that out. So the task would be very specific to what can be accomplished for the quarter with target and completion dates, hoping that those target dates are not all pushed at the end of the quarter, that we're checking them slowly and steadily as we progress towards the end of the quarter and completing them or making adjustments in our plans as we realize we're not going to reach completion dates. Then there's who that task is assigned to. This would be mirrored right out of Industar. I know you don't have access to, you're not seeing that screen in Industar, but this is a similar process as to what they're doing in Industar. It is not duplication because what they're doing in Industar is a yearly plan, and this is just focused for the quarter. Okay, so where it says met or not met and evidence of completion. Some of your reports that you'll see from all of the priority schools may have some boxes that are met or not met. There may be some evidence there that seems unclear. So you currently have the second quarter reports. The school improvement unit's work for the starting at the beginning of the third quarter is for us to go back into the buildings and say, hey, can you show us that? Can you explain this to us? So that we can then sign off on either, yes, you're meeting that, that's great evidence, or we can provide those next steps so that they can add additional tasks for the third quarter. So that ongoing process of consistently looking at data and consistently monitoring our progress towards full implementation. Then the next section is the principals report. And in this principals report, we're really just looking to see what the level of support is, what the principal feels is the level of support being given to his or her building. It's not just like everything else in this report, we're just looking for trends, not an I got you or you're doing something incorrectly. Just a way for us to generate probing questions to take back to the leadership team so that they can begin to make some additional progresses. So just asking if the district leadership team is meeting and what is the level of support, what are the specific interventions that are taking place in the building. And then that third question down says, what supports have your team received from the external provider? They may or may not have one. It depends on the building. You would know if they have an external provider by looking back at that cover sheet on the beginning of the quarterly report. And then it asks about the internal SIS, so that locally hired school improvement specialist that's working directly in the building for the district. And then what is the support of the ADE SIS team? The building principal may or may not see the ADE SIS team as direct support to him or her like they have in the past, because our role changed and we're really working directly with that internal school improvement specialist. And that school improvement specialist is then working in tandem with the building principal. So before, as our unit went in, we actually pulled the building principal for part of the day and took up his or her time. That role is shifting, so we just say that to you because oftentimes it wasn't reported that we were seen as direct support to the building principal. Then we just ask about barriers. So barriers meaning what is actually preventing progress from taking place, and then how are they monitoring areas or skill areas of science, then what interventions are taking place for math and literacy. And then that next to the last question asks about meaningful decisions and actions made by the school leadership team. So as these reports came into our office, they started trickling in sometime as schools went on Christmas break, and then all the way up, really they were due on January the 15th. But that gave our unit a lot of time during Christmas break, because schools were out but we were in, kind of thing, to go into their InduStar and really look at their minutes and agendas and say, hey, what are their most important things that they're talking about in these meetings? And does the local school improvement specialist put their reports in here in a timely manner? Are they reporting out on how they are giving support to the building? Are they reporting on our support to them as the locally hired person? And are they actually making decisions based on data that's coming to the leadership team from the instructional teams? And we can see that when we look inside of their InduStar minutes and agendas. And then that last question is a chance for the building principal to explain the story of how they may modify things for the next quarter.
So now we start asking them to look at specific kinds of data. But this, as we said earlier, is surface level collection. So the first part we would ask is, what's the grade level that your school serves? What are the number of students enrolled? Now, one of the questions people have is, well, why do we put the numbers out each quarter? If we're very stable, well, that would be part of your analysis. Are the numbers the same and you're not stable, meaning you have a high turnover but you're remaining, so that at the surface level it looks like you have the same kids, but if you have a high turnover, that's not captured. So that's where we would be thinking there would be a comment and a clarification. As you move to the number of students with disabilities, the question that we're wanting them to start to delve down into is, how are our students with disabilities doing? And the same with our EL students. As well as what percent of our population falls into either category, and what is research tells us is best practice with these populations. Then we get to the number of students with 5 or more referrals, and that refers to discipline referrals. Interestingly, what we received back initially was some pushback on this one, because the buildings were reporting out that that's not how we put it into ABSCAN. And they were wanting to wait till the end of the quarter to run a report to tell them how they were doing. And what we're trying to move people to understand and to think about is, as you go through the quarter, what your leadership team and your instructional teams would be doing is taking a look at what types of referrals, what are the reasons students are being sent from the classroom, what time of day are the students being sent from the classroom, do we have specific teachers that are over referring students out of the classroom? How much time am I as an administrator consumed with discipline versus my ability to get to the classroom and provide support to teachers through observations, feedback, those methodologies. And what we're finding in many of the schools labeled academic distress and priority is that we're burying the administration with referrals on student behavior rather than implementing yesterday you heard the term positive behavior systems, PBIS, positive behavior intervention systems. Okay. We're not embracing those. We're still moving down the path of having a set of rules. If the student violates the rules, we send them to the office. We've got to get into a more progressive think. As you look at a couple of the reports, they talk about that. One of the questions, a great question, was if I send a student out of the classroom, but it's part of a behavior plan, is that counted in a referral? And the answer to that question is no, because that's part of your strategy for addressing the need of that child related to behavior. So it's not a referral. But everybody else, we want to know why they're coming out of the classroom. Now, we tied that right next to attendance. Because as you think about it, one of the pieces we want them to begin to analyze is if you have students that are missing 10 days or more, is that related to discipline? Is that because you're suspending them, or is that because they have a medically fragile condition? Is that because they are, a flu came through? And there's lots of reasons why that might be. That is what we're saying, put in your clarification, dig down and start telling your story. Now moving to the next page. I only knew how. Okay, again, we asked for the grade level, and we asked for the percent of core teachers that are absent 5 or more days. The reason we're asking for this information, again, is not that we're going to react to a high percentage or a low percentage. What we want them to do is to embrace an analysis of why they might have a high percentage. And as you think about, I think Mr. Burton brought it up yesterday, there are times of the years when you have high activity, where both a set of students and their advisors are out of the buildings, they're absent. Well, that's a clarification to explain that. And so as you're reading the reports, what we're suggesting to you is that the actual numbers up above are of less importance to the comments, the clarifications, and the analysis of how they're thinking. Instead, let's move on to the next page.
Okay, the next 2 pages mirror each other. One's for the math data that we're requesting, and then for the ELA data that we're requesting. And if we were to refer back to the page that Ms. Hickman shared, one of the indicators that schools are being asked to assess and monitor initially is engaging teachers in assessing and monitoring student mastery. And you heard Mr. Glasgow stand up yesterday and kind of explain that process. So what our goal is here is that our schools are giving teacher-made assessments, and that they're looking at where the students are prior to instruction and where they are post-instruction, and that they're using that data to drive their decision-making. And that decision-making should be taking place in the instructional teams or the PLCs, and then filtering back up into the leadership teams and the district-level teams. And so we're requesting on this page the number of students that failed the previous year. It kind of gives you a benchmark for where students are as they come in, and then the number of students enrolled in the quarter. We also ask for D's and F's in the math class that quarter. Then they're reporting each unit exam results, and you're going to see some discrepancies in the reports to the number of unit tests that are being given, and this has been a process for our schools to implement, giving the teacher-made unit assessments.
And then we request the schools to report the numbers of D's and F's on the unit exams or the post-test. The discrepancy comes a lot of times in the failure rate on the post-test compared to the failure rate in the classroom. And so we're calling their attention to analyze that and start to create some plans and some analysis of why that's occurring. So hopefully, in the reports this quarter, you're seeing some comments and clarifications in those reports, but no, increasingly into third quarter, we're providing additional guidance to teams on analyzing that data. Let's see. And then each school has the opportunity to provide additional data. And we're encouraging them not to just run reports and include them with their quarterly report. We really want them to analyze any additional data they have that is showing progress for their school.
Again, I want to be careful when we speak in generalities. There are lots and lots of good work going on out in the field. And so when we talk about some commonalities of problems, we make it sound like it's across the board. But we have pockets of excellence, but we still have some challenges ahead. And really it's getting us to think differently. Later today, we hope to continue this discussion with the subcommittee for academic distress and to get feedback on the format. Should we start thinking about changes for next year? Just the general conversation about the information. We hope that the subcommittee will begin to use the reports to identify superintendents, principals, and school board presidents to come before the subcommittee to review the progress or lack of progress, because I do believe by the end of the third quarter, you will be able to fully tell who is embracing and understands the process and who is resisting and not understanding the process. So with that said, are there any questions other than why can't I run technology?
Ms. Savers is going to start.
Just real quickly, your last comment, your leadership and your team's leadership has been invaluable. And I think, speaking on behalf of the academic committee, on subcommittee on academic distress, we really count on your leadership to let us know, based on your reading of the reports, because you clearly, have a much better idea of the districts or the schools that we need to be focused on. So really open to hearing your suggestions on that, and hope that you'll be really honest with us about it. And so that's one thing. And then secondly, I had so many comments and questions as you went through here, but I'm going to limit myself to this one because this has really just always bothered me. The ability of the principal, in this case with the reports, to accurately assess what the realities are. What is your perception of how often that might happen?
Again, it is principal specific, and so there's not really a generality we can apply to that. What we can say is a beginning principal really does not come to the table with the background knowledge to do some of the work, and yet we continue to see in many of the most needy schools, those being first-year principals or second-year principals. So with just that caveat, it is one of the reasons why we also gave them the general description of what it looks like when it's fully implemented. So rather than say, would you figure it out? Now, that goes against my philosophy. You got to do the work in order to benefit from the work. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we needed to fast track especially our academic distress schools. So taking some of that work off of them. It was also at a time when the unit was at kind of probably an all-time low in terms of personnel. So we didn't have, for the first semester, the personnel to actually support the buildings to the level that they needed support. So, and I don't mean that as a pitch or anything. I'm just saying that was part of the reason why we put that in for them, because we would not be there on a frequent enough basis to walk them through that process.
Right. But that does, you know, in our bigger picture conversation that we've had today about strategy, statewide strategy, I mean, that's one thing that we really need to stay focused on, is to help districts understand that a first-year principal in a school that's struggling might not be your best strategy
Right.
to improve student achievement.
Or what is your support plan so that you're going to support that person, because you might want somebody that is young and enthusiastic and brings that energy, but at the same time, how are you going to then backfill for the technical side that they probably don't have as they come into the building?
Thanks.
So,
Do the principals use the data on the pre and post test to know which classrooms the students are not achieving mastery, and how to go in and see if they can pinpoint? Sometimes it's something as simple as one little thing that the teacher is missing, maybe the on-real learnings, maybe, you know, the really solid task analysis of what is needed in order to receive mastery. Do you believe they should, and do you encourage them to use this as sort of their approach to prioritize the teachers where they do their classroom visits and evaluations?
Yes to all of that and more, in the sense that we first think that the instructional team should analyze their own data as a team. How did you do? Here's how I did. Did you get better results than I did with same kind of student? So then doing our own PD, how could I come and watch you? Could I come and observe how you did that? So there's a PD at that level. Then as that information goes on to the leadership team, it is also to say, we need this information in order for us to direct resources. If we have instructional facilitators, they should be going to the classrooms where the teachers are not getting the same results as other teachers. So the intent is, this is the base data that they need to have, are those post-unit exams. The pre-test is really, the intent is about differentiation of instruction. So but I also think that when you looked at Little Rock yesterday, the idea of looking at their pre-tests and their post-tests, Dennis was absolutely correct when he said it generates questions. If the students did as well on the pre-test as they did on post-test, why did we take them through the instruction? Why did we waste their time? Those are the kinds of thoughtful questions we're trying to get started in all the schools, but in particular in our academic distress and priority schools.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner.
this is a great report, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to point to, because it's an ongoing struggle that Dr. Gocher and I deal with on a regular basis, is that a couple of these slides talk about that compliance mentality. We in Arkansas have been, in our nation, have been in a compliance mentality since at least No Child Left Behind, and maybe previous to that. When I was in the legislature, we started a conversation at that level about ACCEP and what was the original intent, what had it become, and what we're finding, and what Dr. Wild and his team are encountering out there in the field, is the difficulty of getting beyond the compliance mindset with regard to our school improvement process. The IndiStar tool is a great tool to do that if the understanding is there. I mean, I know Dr. Gocher and I've fielded calls from district level administrators saying, well, I have all these things to fill out. I have all these fields that I have to fill in. And the question is, well, why are you doing that as a district administrator? Because, well, I'm trying to take things off my principal's plate. well, that's not how this is supposed to work. You're not doing them a favor by taking things off their plate, because the building principal is the one where that needs to take place, where that thoughtful process needs to happen, so that it then can be delivered to their classroom teachers. I'm very glad that we did a field test in the second year of InduStar. We may need a third and fourth year field test. I don't know, because it's that difficult. And it's not, I don't want anyone to think that I'm throwing stones at our folks out in our school districts. It's what they've been conditioned. It's what we've all been conditioned with. I think it's a change in mindset from our perspective here at the agency. It's a difficulty for some of our legislative partners that are accustomed to, especially if they've been in the schools, that making sure that we check the box for how NSLA dollars are being used, and all these things are in place as a compliance piece, not as an overall planning strategy. So I just want to express my thanks to this team for the work they're doing, because it's not, and they're just talking about in priority schools, but it's not just in our priority schools. It's in all of our districts and all of our schools. We have examples of district level and building level teams who have embraced it and are doing well and are running with it. Kind of a best, examples of best practice that we can point to. There are others who just continue to struggle. So I just want you all to understand that the challenge that we are encountering with that transition from the compliance to true improvement and a collaborative process, that's not going to go away anytime soon. ESSA embraces that as well, where we're moving away from compliance to a cooperative, collaborative on all levels. So anyway, I just wanted to give them support for what they're doing, and kind of drive home a couple of points in this presentation. And hopefully there are folks out there listening to this on the live stream that can hear us say again, we're moving away from the compliance. So when something appears to be compliance, they need to ask questions to say, okay, help me understand how this is not compliance versus planning, because we want to have those conversations.
I would also just like to compliment the commissioner. I don't, and to address Ms. Saver's statement about that, hopefully that we would be honest. We are no more honest here than we are at the building and at the district first. And because my style is somewhat direct, soft-spoken, but it's still direct. There are people who are offended when we say you're not doing your job. So to that degree, who do you think they call when Dr. Wild says you're not doing your job? Well, who is that person to be saying that to me because I am so-and-so? Well, just know that he is taking heat for our unit probably on a weekly basis. Hopefully not daily, but probably on a weekly.
Some weeks it's daily.
Well, somebody has to be the big stick, so you walk softly and carry the big stick, and he gets all the heat. So that's the way it's supposed to go. Thank you. I think Dr. Barth, I thought we were finished.
So,
Dr. Barth has a
Just
question.
a quick question, the reference to ESSA, and I know everybody's still trying to figure out what that piece of legislation is going to mean in terms of how systems that have been in place are look in the future. What do y'all have a sense at this point whether kind of the strategy that's been laid out and we've got real clarity about, are we going to be able to maintain it? I know that obviously states get more room to maneuver in terms of using the systems that make the most sense for them. Is that your sense that we're going to be able to kind of keep what makes sense here?
My sense is that what we're working on is just school improvement, good improvement practices no matter what, okay? So to some degree, it doesn't matter what the federal law is. The state's moving down a path of doing, just take a look at Forward and the work going on there. this very much complements what they're talking about. So if we stay the course, I think all of this fits in.
Mhm. Good.
One last thing, because I love Dr. Wild.
One last thing.
But one last thing. I'm a big believer in celebration, and I want my colleagues to acknowledge the work that this unit has done under Mr. Harvey and Miss Dr. Barnes, Miss Barnes. I can't remember who's the doctor. I'm a doctor, not a doctor. Anyway, you guys will never know how much we all appreciate you. The progress that we've made since we first started down this path of identifying schools in academic distress and really understanding what a priority school means is like the difference between night and day. And it's so positive for kids and for communities, and it's going to make a huge difference. And I hope that you understand every day how much we appreciate your work, because it's huge.
And I think the unit feels very
Yes.
supported, so thank you.
Ms. Zook, for
Yes, I noticed that this really helps in making a huge job of going through all of these reports much easier as that I can. Anyway, thank you. The question I had is, there were only 16 of the 42 that had the met and not met marked. Is there some reason for that?
Again, as Ms. Frazier was saying, part of that work occurs in the third quarter. So as we're going back out, we're confirming. So depending on when we received the report and how much had been inputted into the system so we could do a desk audit of their work, we were able to do it with some, we weren't able to do it with others. And there are actually a couple of schools that marked it themselves. And so we're in the process of removing those. So.
Well, I was about to say Marvel Lane High School seemed to be a star because what they started in elementary seems to be transferring to high school, but they may be one of the ones who marked their own. So, but yeah, I particularly noticed that because they had gotten so much attention and done so much good at the early grades that it seems that it's coming in at the high school.
You also bring up a good point, though, in the sense that one of the things we're analyzing is if you look at the objective, we're asking the question of, do those tasks, if you did those tasks and you completed them, would it reasonably move you towards better implementation? Because a lot of people are putting in tasks that have nothing to do with the objective, and so we're aware of that, and we see that. And so, again, that's depth of knowledge, and that's a piece that we're working on.
I noticed in one school that it seemed like all the tasks were there, but there's like one lady's name is by all of the tasks, and I was going, well, does she not have staff, or does she, controlling, or anyway, it seemed a bit overwhelming for one individual.
Okay, thank you again. We're going to break for lunch until 12:30. Lunch is in the Commissioners' conference room. Third floor. Jay, you leaving now? Cindy Smith and Greg Rogers, the quarterly report on Helena, West Helena School District.
Hi, I'm Cindy Smith with Fiscal Services, and we have submitted the quarterly financial report to you for Helena, West Helena. And the district is on task right now.
Get real close.
A little bit closer, is that better? Yes. The district's budget is right where we need it to be for this time in the fiscal year. And we just had their final audit for FY15, and it was much improved from prior years. We just had one finding for them, and it was just for segregation of duties. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Thank you. Is that it for them? Okay. Give our congratulations to Mr. Hoy and tell him hello for us, please. Report 7, Commissioner Key, yearly review of Superintendent Helena, West Helena School District.
This really goes hand in hand with the previous report on the fiscal condition. Dr. Gocher and I reviewed the performance of Mr. Hoy, and the report is there available, and be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Okay. Then we'll move to the next report, Report 8 from Cindy Smith and Greg Rogers, quarterly report on Pulaski County Special School District.
Pulaski County, we have submitted their quarterly financial reports. Their budget is also where it needs to be for this point in the fiscal year. This week, we just did their exit interview for their audit for FY15, and they only had one audit finding, and it was segregation of duties.
Okay.
So we're very pleased.
Okay, good. Move on to your report, Report 9, Commissioner Key.
And same with Dr. Guess. The report is there for you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Not one question. Nobody has a question. No, we're not acknowledging you. Okay. Our congratulations to you too, Dr. Guess. Thank you. All right. All right. Okay, we're down to our final report, which is comes from Dr. Richard Wild, quarterly report on Little Rock School District.
Richard Wild, School Improvement Unit Program Manager. For the most part, Ms. Barnes, because we are the unit assigned to do a quarterly report to the legislature on Little Rock School District's progress towards exit criteria, we just thought that the board would probably want to review that and see what was sent and have it, if you had any questions, we could respond to those.
Are there any questions by any board member? Ms. Zook?
Is there anything that your unit can do to affect this disturbing teacher absence?
One of the pieces that we're trying to get to is the analysis of what percent of your teachers are absent because of your professional development, what percent. So what we will be doing is assisting them in developing a plan related to their attendance. At the same time, we will be discussing with them a plan for teacher replacement. So as I know they were talking yesterday in their report about certain buildings and TFA and other processes. So we will be assisting with planning related to recruitment, retention, and in the waiver itself, it talks about in our priority schools that the district should be incentivizing the individuals that are effective to stay there, as opposed to seeking other positions in other buildings that maybe don't have the same pressure. And I'm stealing Mr. Curris's word from yesterday. They really do feel pressure. And at some point, that pressure will become detrimental itself. And what we do know is in the buildings that the principals, if I'm in an academic distress building or in a priority school, really one of my goals is to get out. You know? And so we've got to take that into account as a state Many of the principals, and why we see so many new principals is because it is a career path to those other jobs. That is the first open position, and so they're moving into, they're taking that first job. So in answer to your question, we're going to be working with them on coming up with plans, but the plan can't be a generic plan. It's got to address the reason, whether they're in control of it or if it's Monday, Fridays. There's lots of variables that play into that.
When you say PD, I know that children are out of school several times during the year while the teachers have PD or work day, and I know that teachers start back to work before kids get there. Are you talking about PD because they don't know how to teach well, so you're having to pull them out to teach them what they need to be doing? What?
And there are a variety of initiatives. As you take a look at just the professional development calendars that each of the districts have, there are a number of days where they have to hire substitutes in order to meet their timeline for implementation of an initiative. And so with that said, they have, and in truth, we ask them to do a lot of things. So if you take a look at MDC and LDC, those are great training programs. But some of that training is during the school year. And as we take a look at some of the other things we do with principals, you heard Mr. Burton say that they have absenteeism for all intents and purposes from their principals or their administrators also. Well, a lot of times we're generating that by the professional development schedule to implement initiatives that the district and the state are doing.
But this only talked about if they are absent more than 5 days in a 9-week period, and you're not pulling them out 8 days in a 9-week period, are you?
No. But if you anticipate that it's cumulative, meaning if I am sick 2 days and then I'm out for 3 days of PD, then I hit that 5-day mark. So the question really is to separate those and to get that analysis going. And there is a difference between the Monday, Friday and person absenteeism and the person who has an extended illness. And I think, again, Mr. Burton alluded to that from Little Rock yesterday in relationship to some of these were medical leaves, and they can't necessarily put that into their report. So it's just getting that analysis deeper now that we also identified this as a problem. We've verbalized it for a couple of years. What we're doing now is we're starting to collect data on it so that people are sensitized, and what we're trying to do is get the districts to pay attention to it so they can say, do our policies encourage teachers not to come to work, or do our policies encourage teachers to come? And such as, do we buy back the sick days at the end of the year? Do we give an incentive for being at work? And not just, I know our typical thinking is, well, the person's salary is that incentive. Okay. In truth, if I have annual leave, and we're beginning to confuse sick leave and annual leave across the country, that it is my right to take these days, and so if I have a headache, okay, then I think I'll stay home today. If I'm in a high-pressure school, and if I'm struggling in that high-pressure school, then what is the probability that I'll just say, okay, today I can't go today, okay? So we don't know to what degree we have that kind of absenteeism. But I think the lady from the association yesterday kind of tried to address that in talking about they're working on it also to get the teachers to understand the problem. And it may not be as big a problem as we think, okay? And again, we have not yet done that deep data analysis. So I want to caution us not to respond too quickly. Now, when we start seeing 70, 80% of the teachers, 90% of the teachers, then that means we've got a huge number of teachers in the core subjects that are not there. But the next question is, the people that missed the percentage the first quarter, are they the same the second quarter? And are they the same the third quarter? So that by the end of the year, they were really out 20 or 25 days as we went through the school year. So that's an analysis we haven't done yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah, I think the thing that brought it to my attention first is on the 15th of January, Baker gave a speech, and he said, I've got three numbers, and he said three numbers. The first one was the number of miles transported for kids. The next one was that, and then he said 285, the number of teachers that called in sick today. And he called it Oaklanditis. But I don't know why they were absent that day. You know, I have no clue because, but that made me look at this report. That was my paradigm as I looked at this report, thinking if they're not even reporting the first 5 days you're absent, and this is the percent of people that are being absent more than 5 days, that's, you know, that's a week of a child's instructional time.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm not going to belabor it with you, but it is alarming.
Any other questions? If not, thank you for your report. Okay, then that, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think I am, that ends our day as far as the regular agenda is concerned. So I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Mr. Black. Second?
Second.
Okay. Now we're going to just have a little shift here in about 10 minutes, getting ready for the Academic Distress Committee, Ms. Savers and her report and her committee. So everyone travel safely home and see you next month.